Welcome to Closing the Distance. Hi, I'm Matt Moore. A fun episode today. We're down in Old Mexico. We're going to check in with my staff members, Skye Risinger and his daughter, Skye. A great show. Skye kills a couple of nice bucks. Let's get started.
Closing the Distance is brought to you by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Hunter Safety System, dedicated to saving hunters' lives. Executioner Broadheads, born to kill. Treason, don't just blend, become. And by Citadel, revolutionary shoot-down shape. Today on Closing the Distance, we're discussing the fine line between making the perfect shot or having bow hunting adversity. Several big bucks to highlight in Old Mexico. We'll be right back. Closing the Distance is made possible by tree limb quivers. There's only one tree limb quiver. Sword sights, sharp solutions in aiming. Elusive Wildlife Technologies, taking the elusive out of wildlife. The Stage Deer Attractant, finally, a synthetic scent that works. Matthews Archery. And by the amazing Luminaut. Can your arrow not do this?
I want to tell you about a big buck that I went down and hunted in Old Mexico several years ago. Actually, it's back in 2012. It was the first time I went down to this ranch, and ranch manager, he gave me some photos and stuff to look at of a couple of bucks that he wanted me to hunt. And this one in particular was already, he guessed him to be 6.5, 7.5 years old at this time. He was a big typical frame deer, typical 14 point. And I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to hunt this deer. We set up there and glassed, basically. We really never hunted him, but we glassed the area for a couple of days, and the deer never showed up. 2013 rolled around. I was all excited about it. Started coming down to the ranch in the earlier time of the year, and sure enough, we had trail cam pics of this deer again, and he was fairly regular at a feed station. It looked to be something pretty simple to set up on and hunt. Didn't think a whole lot about it. I went in there, and finally I ended up setting up a ground blind in this area where this deer pretty much had been, I'd say, fairly regular at this feed station. And I set up, about 100 yards off of it maybe. And you know what? You can say it's probably my fault. I don't know what all I did wrong, but it looked like it was going to be an easy hunt, to be honest. It looked like it was going to be an easy hunt. And from the time I set that ground blind up, I don't know if it had as much to do with the ground blind, me being in there, or buck starting to chase does a little bit, but this deer vanished. No more photos of him. And it went weeks without anybody seeing it, and then finally we might get one picture of it at night, and then it disappeared again. And what looked to be an easy hunt, next thing you know, nobody's seen the deer. I hadn't got any video footage of it or anything. And one day I'm sitting there filming, and this same shooter buck comes in on me with a doe. And I was like, wow, I really didn't, until I saw him in person, I really didn't realize how big a body of deer it was, and his overall frame. He was pushing probably 170. He was in range. I would not take the shot through a barbed wire fence. I've seen it done, and I've probably done it myself, but I wouldn't do it, So I didn't take a shot thinking, okay, I found this deer again. I'll set up on him. Well, that was the only time I ever saw him the whole rest of the year. I chose to go back to an old box blind, a gun blind that they had, and this deer frequented that area pretty good bit. The blind had been there for years. The deer didn't pay any attention to it. I asked the landowners, could I modify this blind? It had windows in it about that wide, about that long. I wanted to be able to shoot a bow out of it. And they said, yeah, no problem. I go in there and I take me a Sawzall, and I cut me a great big old hole, where I can sit in there and video and shoot my bow out of this blind. These deer, they tend to be what you'd call Mr. King around. So if you put out a lot of corn in one spot, a lot of bait there, the dominant buck in that area will kind of try to take that over, and I found that out. And sure enough, I had a lot of deer activity in front of me. So when this this buck had came into the feeding station, which was about 150 yards away from me. And when he saw the other activity, some other bucks down there close to me, man, he jumped out of that feed station, and here he came. And you couldn't ask for anything any more heart pounding and just adrenaline rush of watching a buck of that dominance, you know, kind of go into a, what I call an aggressive, you know, sidestepping. He almost like he just sidestepped all the way down the road. He bristled up and came down the road, which I'll admit it added to probably me being more nervous about a shot. I drew my bow back on him. I'm pinned in, and the deer is giving me the world. I'm fixing to get a great shot off on this deer. No problem. He's quartering away just a little bit. I'm on him, and he takes a step and gets out of center of my video. I've got my flip out screen. I can see that it's out of, and I'm at full draw. And it's funny, but it's not funny. I'm telling you. I'm gonna ease over here like this. And I'm gonna try to bump my camera around just a little bit and center him back up, but I'm still at full draw. When I do, I lose my draw, and my bow goes down like this. And of course, to me, it sounded like the world exploded. And the deer, he raised his head up and he looked around, and my, you know, in the rush of things, I'm thinking he's fixing to blow. I just blew it. He's fixing to be out of there. But looking back at the video, he went back to eating corn. He probably wasn't going anywhere. But that's not what's in my brain. And my brain is, oh no. As soon as he puts his head back down, I'm drawing back and I'm finding me a spot, and I'm mentally looking with my eyes where I need to send the arrow.
Coming up, we'll continue the hunt for this huge old Mexico whitetail. Closing the Distance will be right back. Closing the Distance is brought to you by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Hunter Safety System, dedicated to saving hunters' lives. Executioner Broadheads, born to kill. Treason, don't just blend, become. And by Citadel, revolutionary shoot-down shape.
As soon as I hit the deer and he wheels to run off, you know, and I put my stuff up, I get my binoculars up. And like I say, I'm upset because the arrow doesn't go through the animal, but I'm watching him run off, and he goes out there maybe 75 yards and he stops. And I can just see his old rack, you know, just start looking around like what was that? And that's not normal. If you hit a deer and you know they run 50, 60 yards and they start getting all wobbly, that's what you want to see. You want to see the old wobble, and you want to see them tip over, you know. Man, on no dirt nap, this deer, he starts walking off.
I was in Old Mexico when Johnny shot the buck, and Johnny drove over and got me out of the bow stand, and we were going to look at the footage. And now granted, this is our 18th season to produce an all bow hunting show, and we filmed our hunt several years prior to even starting the show. I do all the editing, so I've got a big database of shots that are just tattooed in my mind. And my first reaction of looking at the footage is that this deer's still walking. There's nothing up there in that higher part of the chest cavity. That's no man's land, especially at the quartering to your shot. There's nothing up there to kill him. We even put a tracking dog on the buck, and the tracking dog told us exactly what we already thought, that the deer was still alive.
Next season rolls around, you know what's on my mind. I gotta start looking for this deer. Now it's more than a vendetta. Now it's I gotta find this deer again. I owe it to this deer, you know, to find him. And of course, to me, it's a game, one-on-one. So far, the buck has whooped me pretty good, but I plan on, you know, trying to get my revenge. Start checking game cameras, and never laid eyes on the deer. No other hunters laid eyes on deer, so I don't know if he just kind of become a little more wary. And you also got to realize 3 years have gone by. This deer's pushing 10 years old. A whole nother year goes around. The following year, I've got some ideas in my head. We had been hooking up with these guys with Citadel blinds. I know Matt and them had hunted out of them in South Texas, and they were telling me all the results they were getting out of them. And I was like, I want some of them blinds. I want to try to put those up into an area where I knew this deer was going to be at. The game didn't pay these new blinds any attention at all. But we put these blinds up and immediately deer were feeding up and down the road right under them, not paying them any attention at all. On this next trip that I'm going, I'm taking my youngest daughter, which is now 21 years old, taking her along on this trip. The first time she sets, this buck, he comes out of an area that I didn't even think he would come from. I expected him to come from the right. He comes from straight out in front of us. I look up, and I'm glassing with binoculars, and I'm like, well, that's what I thought. You know, here's this buck that's been hunting for years. He's right out in the road, and he's feeding right straight toward us. But this particular year, this deer has gone downhill. And it makes you almost feel, but you know, sometimes we fuss about shooting a deer too early. They hadn't met their prime, you know, they're 4 and 5 and they haven't grown to their potential. Well, now we've got a deer that's not because we didn't try to shoot him, but because I let him get away. A deer that was once pushing in the low 170s is now a 145-inch 10-point. A deer that was a typical frame 14-point, just a magnificent animal. He's pushing 11, 12 years old, and he's gone downhill. Not to mention with the stress of being shot. And we're looking at basically a 145 to 150-inch, heavy horn 10-point that's not used to be 20-something inches wide. Now he's 16.
After the break, more tips on making the perfect shot. Closing the Distance will be right back. Closing the Distance is made possible by Tree Limb Quivers. There's only one tree limb quiver. Sword sights, sharp solutions in aiming. Elusive Wildlife Technologies, taking the elusive out of wildlife. The Stage Deer Attractant. Finally, a synthetic scent that works. Matthews Archery. And by the amazing Luminot. Can your arrow not do this?
You know, this deer is walking in on a string where he's coming straight toward us. I made another mistake, like granted this is a new area, but I made another mistake of putting out a bait pile I'm trying to get my daughter a shot at 15, 20 yards, don't get me wrong. So I put it out, and I did it in the dark. I put it out too close to the blind, and I also, knowing what I know about things, I should have put it up against some brush or something so that it makes them turn around and go up to it. My fault once again. So deer comes in straight on toward us and feeds directly in front of us for a good 30 minutes. Even though this deer is pushing 12 years old, he is still the dominant buck in this area. If you don't believe me, you can watch him how he acts around here. But he goes over and he hooks some more bushes and he works a scrape and he just gives us a show. Skye knows where she wants the legs, the whole 9 yards. She's been around me her whole life with hunting lots of other places. Most deer that we shoot at, I've always told her, man, you gotta aim low. I said, they're gonna drop, they're gonna, all these different scenarios you take in your head. So this deer gets all lined up there. Arrow passes through the whole 9 yards. If anything, and I didn't think anything at all, if anything, this deer doesn't even drop like a normal deer. The arrow just went through him just how he stood. And you look at it in slow motion, he didn't really move. So he didn't drop down. And she's always been taught to aim low. Because everything happened, I think we were celebrating a little too much. I didn't even look at the video footage to go back and say, well, was it even a questionable shot or was it perfect? We're getting all of our stuff together and we should have been more watching or whatever, but I like catch a glimpse of a deer in that same spot walking off. And I'm like, no way did that deer get up and move. I found where this deer had laid down. We go back to camp, we watch a video, and there's all the guys are in camp, and they're like, oh yeah, you got this deer. And a couple other people was like, well, it's got a little bit of a bad angle to it. And like, first time I really noticed that, it's like, yeah, it was a little bit of a quartering shot that didn't seem like it was when you're in the blind, but it did have a little quartering, and then you start looking at the height of it, and me knowing where the lungs are, and how they go up and back on a deer. Guys, gals, when you're bow hunting, it's a game of inches, and I mean a game of inches. That could be so much. You can make a terrible bad shot and be an instant killing shot. You can be 6 inches off and make a very good killing shot, even though it wasn't where you was aiming. Or you can be 1 inch off from where you're aiming and miss lung or miss heart. It's so critical and all that ram. People used to tell you that if you can hit a pie plate, you can kill a deer. Well, that's true, but you need to be able to hit exact pinpoint spot. And I will give my daughter credit for this. Skye's a very good shot, and I think she hit exactly where she was aiming. Granted, where she was aiming with the angle, and keeping in mind the deer did, without the deer dropping. The deer dropped like a normal deer would normally drop. I don't know if it had anything to do with the citadel blind, or what, maybe covering up some sound or whatnot. But most any time you're gonna have a deer that drops at least 2 or 3 inches. That deer done that, it's double lung, it's over. We go back the next morning, just her and I the next morning, and all I can think about is, boy, I hope the coyotes didn't get on this deer. Well, after about a good hour of very, very, very slow trailing with the dirt, there was very little blood to be found, and you start to get discouraged. So I go to the ranch hands that live there on the ranch, and I showed them the area on the map where this deer was last seen, and I said, please, will you watch for this, any kind of birds, coyotes, ride your horse back in this area the next, whatever. I think it's 2 days later, I get a text message from the ranch manager, and the ranch hands had went in due to the birds. They saw the cara birds up in the trees or brush, and went in and found the deer. This deer had went from the last spot that I jumped him. He went at least 600 or 800 yards further. Now, whether he was on a dead run or if he walked, I really don't, there's no way of knowing. But all I know is he went pretty much on I call it a straight line, but it looked like a straight line, a good 600 or 800 yards. And where the ranch hands found this deer, granted they found it with the cara buzzards. I don't know if we would have found it if we'd have walked right by it. It was in a thick thicket. And we had rode horses by there. We couldn't have even rode the horses through it. So I felt good that we give it all that we had to try to look for it. Yes, I was sick about it, but then there was a little bit of I don't know, wouldn't call it a celebration, but a little bit of a complete to the hunt that when they found this, animal.
On today's show, you saw 2 really good examples of one of the biggest shot placement mistakes that us bow hunters make, and that's taking those shots when those animals are just slightly quartering to you. Wait till they're broadside, look at them really close, and wait till they're quartering away. I guarantee you, that'll help you. Let's check in with Brother Mark.
Johnny and Skye are having a great hunt today on the show, and of course, Skye makes a bad shot, and I felt terrible for her, but the truth of the matter is, we all make bad shots. I've made my fair share of bad shots, you've made your fair share of bad shots, and if you keep on hunting and I keep on hunting, we're gonna make more of them. And I think sometimes the misconception is that when you have a string of good hunts, right, 10, 15 kills in a row, that you made perfect shots, you can somehow begin to believe that you're never gonna make a bad shot again, and it's just not true. But I see another misconception that sometimes happens in people's minds, and that is sometimes people think that when you come to God, or if you accept Christ into your life and you become a Christian, that somehow you're never going to make a bad mistake again, or you're never going to have a stumble again, you're never going to have a challenge or a difficulty again, you're not going to get it wrong anymore, and nothing could be further from the truth. When you come to God, it doesn't mean you're any less human. You're still human. And sometimes we're going to get it wrong. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes. But the Bible doesn't say that when we do make those mistakes, that God writes us off or just wipes us away or says, that's it, I'm giving up on them, they can't do it. The Bible says that we have a loving Father and a merciful Father and a graceful Father, and that if we've stumbled and we've made mistakes, that we can come back to Him, and that He'll forgive us and bring us in and forgive us of those mistakes and renew our relationship with Him again. Look, God doesn't expect perfection out of our lives. He just expects that we would strive for purity and a relationship with Him. And when we do that, His grace covers us, His mercy is with us, and He's a loving Father that looks out for our best interest. If you'd like to know more about a personal relationship with God through His Son, Jesus Christ, just go to closingthedistance.com and click on the Moment of Truth tab.